All right, guys, I'm going to do what I do every single week and give everyone a complete bowl breakdown. Totally updated bowl predictions here entering the final week of the regular season, and a lot of these bowls are getting hammered down. A lot of these matchups will probably be close to what we end up getting with only 1 week left. So let's go through these bowls. We've got the Bahamas Bowl, UAB, Eastern Michigan. I would love UAB to win that game. I think UAB is better than their record this season. Eastern Michigan a little bit worse. You've got the Cure Bowl, Western Kentucky versus Marshall. I love Western Kentucky, but Marshall, I have to give Marshall more credit. I bet against them this past week and got burned. Marshall's a good football team. They got a really good defense. Syracuse versus UCF. Oh my goodness, UCF would annihilate Syracuse as long as they have a healthy quarterback, which I'm guessing they would. That's a nice little Fenway Bowl. Yes, I think UCF would be 2 touchdown favorites in that, or at least 10-point favorites. The New Mexico Bowl, Air Force versus BYU. You know, I'm a big fan of Air Force. BYU, offensive-minded team, doesn't play much defense. The LA Bowl, Washington State versus Boise State. Great matchup, both of these teams. You know, Washington State, they've got a great opportunity this week with Washington being at home. That's going to be a higher scoring game. They might get into a better bowl if they can get that win over Washington. And then Boise State, we expect them to trounce Utah State. The Lending Tree Bowl, Miami of Ohio versus App State. I would certainly favor Appalachian State in that matchup. The Las Vegas Bowl, UCLA versus Mississippi State. Certainly UCLA. I think the Pac-12, because they have no playoff teams but a lot of really good teams, they're going to have a very good bowl season. They've got a very deep conference. Washington State, UCLA, Oregon, Utah, Oregon State. Very good conference, very deep conference. Unfortunately, no teams good enough. They kind of ate each other. No teams making the playoff. The Frisco Bowl, it is Southern Miss versus Wyoming. You know what? That's a good matchup. Yes, defensive matchup right there. Defensive matchup. The Myrtle Beach Bowl, Middle Tennessee versus UConn. So that's great to see UConn in a bowl. Middle Tennessee, streaky team. They've got a decent offense. That'd be a fun little matchup. We've got Buffalo versus San Jose State in the Idaho Bowl. I love San Jose State, but Buffalo football. I mean, the Buffalo out of the MAC, I'd probably say is going to win that game. The Boca Raton Bowl, Coastal Carolina and Liberty. It's unfortunate what happened to Coastal Carolina. These two teams are very similar. They've got good records, but they haven't played good schedules. And it is unfortunate what happened to Coastal Carolina with the Grayson McCall injury. I would have to take Liberty. The New Orleans Bowl, UTSA and Troy. Offense versus defense. I would love this matchup. Troy is great on defense. UTSA, though, right now, they're on a warpath. I would take UTSA. The Armed Forces Bowl, not Army versus Navy. It is Kansas versus SMU. What a high scoring. The over-under in that game would be 80. That'd be I'd love for them to do something like that. 2 higher scoring teams and just let them have a shootout. The Independence Bowl, it is Louisiana versus Memphis. That is a crap matchup there. I don't know what to make of Memphis football. They've been so inconsistent this year. Louisiana's been okay. They were better last year. Houston versus Duke. You know what? Duke's had a nice season. I'm probably taking Houston. Houston's been really good. We've got San Diego State versus North Texas. Ooh, I like North Texas. That's another pretty good matchup there. Maryland versus Toledo. Love Toledo. That's the Quick Lane Bowl. So that is the bowl that we all thought Michigan State was going to be in, but Michigan State loses to Indiana and now Maryland. That is the bowl that takes place in Detroit at Ford Field. Imagine going to a bowl game and you got to go to Detroit. Maryland versus Toledo. I'd probably say Maryland, but Maryland's really inconsistent. We'll see. The problem with Toledo is they lost to friggin' Bowling Green. Speaking of Bowling Green, it's got Bowling Green versus South Alabama. Yeah, South Alabama would trounce Bowling Green in my opinion. Rice versus Utah State in the First Responder Bowl. Utah State, both of those teams are bad. I don't know. Miami versus Tulane. Oh, you got to feel bad for Tulane. Tulane would, I think Tulane would win pretty easily over Miami. They would be motivated. Miami going to the Birmingham Bowl would not be good for them. Wisconsin versus Texas Tech. If you're the Big Ten, you really need Wisconsin to win this game for the strength of your conference. And Wisconsin's kind of streaky, but with Jim Leonard and that defense, I think they could win. Wake Forest versus East Carolina. There's another, you would think, high-scoring game, but we just saw East Carolina's offense score 3 points. I would probably take Wake Forest in that game. I'm down on East Carolina right now. Missouri versus Baylor. Baylor for sure. Baylor is straight up better than Missouri. Florida State versus Utah. That could very easily be a New Year's Six game. Both of those teams, in my opinion, are top 10 teams. I know Florida State and Utah, they both have 3 losses. They're both really good. That would be a great matchup in the Holiday Bowl before the New Year's. We've got the Texas Bowl, Oklahoma and Arkansas. Wow. Oklahoma, Arkansas. I would take Oklahoma. Oklahoma definitely has had a disappointing year, but I still think they're good. The Pinstripe Bowl, Pittsburgh and Minnesota. What's the over-under in that game? I think Minnesota would win. Pittsburgh has no passing offense. The Cheez-It Bowl, Oklahoma State, and what is with all these ads, man? I was on this page and there were no ads, and now there's 400 of them. Oklahoma State and North Carolina. You got to go North Carolina. Oklahoma State is a shell of itself. The Alamo Bowl, Texas versus Washington. Fun, higher scoring game. I would probably take Texas. The Mayo Bowl, Purdue versus NC State. That's a defensive battle. I'd say Purdue very slightly. The Sun Bowl, Louisville versus Oregon State. I'm guessing Malik Cunningham would be back for this game. I would probably still go with Oregon State. I like the way Oregon State is playing. The Gator Bowl, Notre Dame versus Kentucky. You got to go Notre Dame. That's a mismatch right now. Of course, this probably will not happen because if Notre Dame does beat USC, they're going to move up in terms of the bowl rankings. If they lose, they probably will be in the Gator Bowl because they would have 4 losses, and Notre Dame does have those really bad losses to Marshall, although Marshall is playing better, and they also have another bad loss to Stanford. The Arizona Bowl, it is Ohio versus Fresno State. I have to take Fresno State. Fresno State's playing really well right now. The Music City Bowl, Illinois versus Florida. I like Illinois. I think Florida would be miserable playing in this bowl. Illinois with Chase Brown. As long as Chase Brown plays, you got to worry about the opt-out for a running back who's probably going to the NFL. Next, we have South Carolina, Iowa. Goodness gracious, Iowa is just impossible. Listen, Iowa, I don't know what to do. They have no offense. They've got a good defense. I'd probably say Iowa slightly. South Carolina, same thing. They play great one week, horrible the next. I don't know how I'm supposed to predict that. Penn State versus Ole Miss. That would be such a tough break for Penn State not getting in a New Year's Six Bowl the way they've played. They get in the best bowl. I think that's not a New Year's Six Bowl, the Citrus Bowl versus Ole Miss, and I would certainly favor Penn State in that matchup. Now on to the New Year's Six Bowls. They still have Clemson and Alabama. Of course, the worry with Alabama is Bryce Young opting out, is Will Anderson opting out. That'll be interesting, an interesting litmus test for Alabama's culture. If they beat Auburn, they're going to get in a New Year's Six Bowl, and they're possibly facing a team like Clemson. Even if Clemson wins out, we don't expect them to make the playoff unless something crazy happens. Clemson versus Bama in a meaningless game. Is Alabama, are guys going to opt out? That's where it gets really bad. The Sugar Bowl, LSU, they have Kansas State, so they do have Kansas State making the Sugar Bowl. I'm guessing they have TCU in the playoff then versus LSU, and I might favor Kansas State. They would certainly have, in my opinion, more to play for, facing an SEC team, being in a New Year's Six Bowl, more motivated than LSU. We see that a lot with the Sugar Bowl when it's the SEC team. In the Cotton Bowl, or what is this? Oh, the Rose Bowl. There's so many ads. It is Michigan and Oregon, so they have Michigan losing to Ohio State and then not getting into the playoff, facing Oregon in the Rose Bowl, which would be a fun matchup in that one. The Cotton Bowl, Cincinnati versus Tennessee. So if Tulane's not going to make it, it's going to be Cincinnati, and they've got them facing and that would not be a good matchup there. Tennessee without Hendon Hooker, that could be a problem for the playoff. Really, what are they going to do with Tennessee? We'll see how Tennessee does against Vanderbilt. You don't want to punish the team because they've had such a good year. You want to give them a good bowl, but you don't want to ruin the bowl. So, wow. I'm guessing what they hope happens is Tennessee loses to Vanderbilt so they don't have to put them in a New Year's Six Bowl. That is interesting. We'll see how that plays out. And then when it comes to the playoff, they have Georgia taking on USC. In a matchup, if I was Georgia and I'm the 1 seed, I would rather face TCU than USC. But if TCU goes undefeated, they will go to the 3 seed. And if Ohio State's undefeated, they're the 2 seed. And then really Ohio State lucks out if this is what it is. Because if you're Ohio State and just the way you match up and how bad your secondary is, you would much rather face TCU if you're Ohio State than USC. So the semifinal games, it's Georgia versus USC, and the projected spread would be Georgia minus 14, and then it's TCU versus Ohio State, and the expected spread on that game would be Ohio State minus 13. And then in the national championship, they still have Ohio State and Georgia. So we've gone over everything, what can happen when it comes to all of these scenarios and things like that. Right now, 7 teams are left, and I think the biggest question, the loser of the Ohio State-Michigan game, if it's Michigan, what if Blake Corum doesn't? Because, guys, we got a tweet that's saying Blake Corum's not playing against Ohio State. One of the Michigan offensive linemen let it slip. I don't know if that's true. We'll have to see. But if you're Michigan and Blake Corum's not 100%, do you seriously consider just not playing him and then having that built-in excuse for the committee? If you lose to Ohio State, you don't have Blake Corum, you're probably going to lose. You're 7.5-point underdogs right now. You've got an excuse, and you can say, listen, we have 1 loss on the road to the number 2 team in the country, and our Heisman Trophy, candidate running back, our best player, didn't play, and now he's healthy. We're going to give him a month to get healthy with the bowl season being very long, and he can come back for the playoff. And then Michigan maybe sneaks in, but the thing that Michigan needs TCU to lose. Well, they don't need TCU to lose. It would help, but they really need USC to lose. That's what Michigan needs. They need USC to lose, and it could potentially set up a debate between a 1-loss Clemson and a 1-loss Michigan who possibly plays Ohio State without Blake Corum and has a built-in excuse. That, now it gets interesting. Now you're starting to really parse because you also have to factor in the committee being pissed off at Michigan's non-conference schedule. So there is a lot of factors at play. I think a lot of these bowl games would be really good. I saw a few that were bad, but overall, what do you do with Tennessee, really? So with Hendon Hooker out for the year, with Tennessee having a horrible defense, if Tennessee beats Vanderbilt, I guess they're virtually guaranteed a New Year's Six Bowl versus whoever the group of 5 team is. That makes it, I would think, that's who it would be. It would be like Cincinnati or Tulane versus, because UCF is out of it now, versus Tennessee at that point. So that's what I think they're going to do with Tennessee. They're going to match Tennessee if they beat Vanderbilt. Of course, if they somehow lose to Vanderbilt, they're 13, 14-point favorites right now with Joe Milton. They would be completely knocked out of a New Year's Six Bowl. But if they do make it, I'm guessing that's what they would do. They would make them play the group of 5 team in the New Year's Six Bowl. That makes the New Year's Six Bowl. So this is very favorable for Ohio State. TCU is a much better matchup than USC, especially for Ohio State secondary. And then the matchup of Georgia versus Ohio State, the projected spread on that is Georgia minus 1.5 right now, as far as I can see, according to the strength metrics. According to Vegas, Georgia on a neutral field against Ohio State is sitting at a 1.5-point favorite. I'm guessing that's probably going to change or shift at least a little bit depending on what Ohio State does against Michigan. But then again, maybe not, because if Ohio State beats Michigan without Blake Corum, that to a degree does invalidate the win. I also heard people arguing that maybe Ohio State will jump Georgia if they beat Michigan because Ohio State would have a better resume than that. But again, if Michigan does not play Blake Corum, I find it very hard to believe Ohio State would jump Georgia. A lot of it depends on the margin of victory, how they win, and if, from what we've seen from Ohio State, even if they beat Michigan, it's probably going to be a struggle. They do not have a good offensive line. Michigan is going to own the trenches. They can still beat them. They got more talent, but I'm just saying it's probably going to be a struggle for Ohio State. It's going to be a closer game. So that is the full bowl breakdown here with 1 week left. We'll see what happens, guys. A lot of these matchups are great. It's great to see, too, these non-conference matchups play out in some of these teams. Obviously, you've got some conferences like the MAC. We love the MAC, but they are significantly weaker. But, guys, we will see what happens. Either way, guys, that's going to do it for this video. Make sure you follow me on Twitter. Link to that's always in the description. I'm, of course, the Depressed Ginger. Thank you for watching.